There is a question most people never allow themselves to ask, not because they don't feel it, but because it is too uncomfortable to face honestly. The question is this: if I've already awakened, why hasn't my life actually changed? Not slightly changed, not in progress, changed. Why do the same patterns keep repeating? Why does the same emptiness return? Why does the same frustration come back again and again? You understand more now. You see more now. You can explain things better now. And yet, you are still here. This is where most people quietly panic, because no one warned them about this stage. They were told awakening brings freedom, clarity, release. But no one told them that awakening does not automatically dissolve the structure of the life you're living. So instead of questioning the idea of awakening itself, people turn the blame inward. I haven't gone deep enough yet. I need more insight. I need a better teacher, another practice, another explanation. And without realizing it, they enter a new cycle, a more refined cycle, a more intelligent cycle, a more spiritual cycle, but still a cycle. The ancient Gnostics warned about this exact moment. They did not fear ignorance alone. They feared something far more subtle. They warned that the soul can recognize illusion and still remain bound by it, because seeing the prison is not the same as leaving it. Let this land clearly. You can perceive the illusion and still live inside its structure. You can name the trap, describe the trap, teach others about the trap, and never actually step out of it. Look at your own experience, not the story you tell about yourself, but the reality underneath. Has your life fundamentally changed? Or has your interpretation of it become more sophisticated? Do the same emotional loops return? The same relational dynamics? The same sense of waiting for something to finally shift? But now you explain them differently. Now you call them lessons, or shadows, or stages of awakening. That is not freedom. That is a prison with better language. The Gnostics were not obsessed with awakening. That obsession is modern. They spoke about liberation, and they understood something modern spirituality often avoids. The ego does not disappear when you awaken. It adapts. It learns new symbols, new words, new identities. And it can wear the mask of awareness just as easily as it once wore ignorance. This is where the real danger begins, when the old identity dies and is immediately replaced by a spiritual one. When the seeker becomes the new character, the new center, the new story. I am awakened. I see the truth. I understand now. But the structure of life remains untouched. Before you said, my life isn't working. Now you say, my life is teaching me something. Before, it hurt. Now you explain it. But the pain didn't dissolve. It was reframed. This is why so many seekers feel stuck but cannot admit it, because admitting it would require facing a terrifying possibility. That awakening, as they understood it, was not enough. That insight alone does not dissolve the loop. That seeing truth is not the same as being free from the pattern that keeps repeating life. The Gnostic texts describe this moment with ruthless clarity. They warn that the soul can believe it has escaped when it has only moved into a higher chamber of the same prison, a more subtle chamber, a more luminous one, but still inside. This is not a failure. It is a threshold, and most people never cross it, not because they aren't intelligent, but because crossing it requires something far more difficult than learning. It requires the collapse of the identity that believes it has awakened. In this first part, I don't want you to change anything. Don't fix yourself. Don't correct your thoughts. Don't search for a solution. Just observe. Observe whether your life is truly unfolding or simply repeating with new explanations. Observe whether freedom is present or whether it is only being narrated. Because if this question begins to disturb you, that is not confusion. That is recognition. Not the beginning of awakening, but the beginning of seeing why awakening alone does not change a life. And what comes next is the part almost no one wants to hear, because the mechanism behind this trap is precise. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Most people assume that if awakening doesn't change their life, then they simply haven't awakened deeply enough. So they double down. They read more, meditate longer, consume more teachings, refine their beliefs, correct their language. But this instinct, the urge to improve awakening, is precisely where the problem begins. Ancient Gnostic texts describe this moment with unsettling precision. They warned that the soul can mistake movement for liberation and insight for freedom. In other words, something can shift internally while nothing actually loosens. The Gnostics did not describe bondage as ignorance alone. They described a far more dangerous condition, awareness that still functions inside the same structure. This is why many seekers feel strangely stuck. They understand more than ever. They see through old illusions. They no longer identify with the past in the same way. And yet, their life repeats, their reactions repeat. Their suffering takes new forms, but never truly dissolves. The same emotional patterns return, the same inner tension persists, the same sense of effort quietly hums beneath everything. According to Gnostic psychology, this happens because awakening can occur without dismantling the center that suffers. The ego does not disappear just because insight appears. It adapts. It learns new language, new concepts, new identities. The Pistis Sophia describes this as the soul remaining bound not by force, but by misrecognition. The soul believes it has crossed a threshold, when in reality it has only changed rooms within the same prison. This is why awakening often feels disappointing after the initial clarity fades. At first, there is relief, perspective, distance from old fears. But then something subtle returns, a need to maintain the awakened state, a fear of falling back asleep, a quiet pressure to live up to a new image of oneself. This pressure is not accidental. The Gnostics taught that bondage survives through continuity of identity. As long as there is someone who believes they are awakened, there is still someone who can lose awakening. As long as there is a self who claims insight, there is still a self that can be threatened. This is the paradox most seekers never see. Awakening reveals truth, but the ownership of awakening recreates illusion. Jesus alluded to this repeatedly, but never framed it as a spiritual achievement. He spoke about seeing, not becoming. Seeing does not accumulate. Seeing does not improve. Seeing does not belong to anyone. But modern spirituality subtly reframes awakening as a personal possession. My awakening, my journey, my level of consciousness. From a Gnostic perspective, this language alone is enough to keep the loop intact, because the structure that repeats your life is not sustained by ignorance. It is sustained by a center that must continue. That center can be fearful, it can be confident, it can be wounded, or it can be spiritual. But as long as it exists as a reference point, the same patterns reorganize around it. This is why changing beliefs rarely changes life. Beliefs sit on the surface. patterns live deeper. The Gnostics were not concerned with what you believed about reality. They were concerned with what you unconsciously protect. And most people protect the same thing endlessly, the sense of being someone who is progressing. Progress feels safe. Stagnation feels dangerous. But progress is still movement inside the same frame. This is why effort eventually exhausts the seeker. No matter how refined the teachings become, there is always another layer to address, another habit, another attachment, another shadow. The loop never ends, because the loop is not caused by what is unresolved. It is caused by who is trying to resolve it. The Gnostic warning was never pessimistic, it was precise. They were not saying, awakening fails. They were saying, awakening misunderstood becomes another role. And roles always repeat themselves. Life does not change when insight appears. Life changes when the need to position oneself inside insight collapses. Until then, awakening can feel real, while the structure of suffering remains untouched. Not because something is missing, but because something is still quietly in control. At some point, every sincere seeker encounters a disturbing realization. They have changed how they think, but not how they live. Their language becomes more refined, their explanations more sophisticated, their understanding more nuanced. Yet the same inner friction remains. This is where many people feel confused, because nothing is wrong on the surface. They are calmer, more aware, less reactive than before. And yet something fundamental has not shifted. According to Gnostic teaching, this happens because awakening can illuminate the mind while leaving the structure of orientation intact. In simpler terms, you can see more clearly while still standing in the same place. The Gnostics called this a partial awakening, not false, but incomplete. Not because insight is lacking, but because the center from which life is navigated remains untouched. This center is subtle. It is not just the ego as arrogance or fear. It is the silent assumption of being the one who manages experience, the one who improves, the one who applies teachings, the one who monitors progress. As long as this manager exists, life reorganizes itself around it. Problems adapt, challenges mutate, suffering becomes more refined, but no less binding. This is why many awakened people feel strangely tired, not physically, existentially. They are exhausted by the need to stay aligned, to stay conscious, to stay awake. This exhaustion is not failure, it is a signal. The Pistis Sophia describes this stage as the soul circling within higher realms without yet passing beyond them. There is light, but it is still structured. There is clarity, but it still requires maintenance. The Gnostics warned that anything requiring effort to sustain is not liberation. True freedom does not need reinforcement. If awakening must be defended, protected, or practiced in order to survive, it has already been absorbed by the same system it was meant to transcend. This is the invisible trap. Awareness becomes another project. Presence becomes another discipline. Silence becomes another achievement. And quietly, the seeker becomes the caretaker of their own cage. This is why life repeats, not because you haven't learned enough, but because learning has replaced seeing. Seeing is immediate. Learning accumulates. Seeing has no owner. Learning always belongs to someone. The Gospel of Thomas points directly to this when it says that the kingdom is spread upon the earth, but people do not see it. Not because it is hidden, but because looking has been replaced by searching. Searching implies distance. Seeing dissolves it. The repetition of life patterns is not punishment. It is feedback. It reveals that something essential is still being approached instead of recognized. And here is the most unsettling insight of all. The self that wants life to change is often the very structure preventing it. This does not mean effort is bad. It means effort has a limit. At a certain depth, effort reinforces the illusion of control. The Gnostics did not teach passivity, they taught precision. They knew the difference between movement that liberates and movement that circles endlessly. When awakening fails to change life, it is usually because awakening has been added to life, rather than allowing life to reorganize around something deeper. The loop persists, not because you are trapped, but because you are still trying to move from inside the loop. And no matter how conscious the movement becomes, movement alone cannot dissolve the structure that generates repetition. Something else must collapse. Not your understanding, not your spirituality, but the assumption that there is someone who must stand at the center of it all. Until that assumption loosens, awakening remains real, yet incomplete. Life remains meaningful, yet unchanged. And the same story quietly finds new ways to repeat itself. If the loop continues, even after insight, then the question is no longer what is missing. The real question becomes, what is still standing? The Gnostics were clear about this, even if their language was symbolic. They taught that bondage persists as long as there is a fixed point from which life is interpreted, not a belief, not a habit, not a flaw, a position. This position is subtle because it does not feel oppressive. It feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels necessary. It is the position of the one who watches, evaluates, and adjusts. The one who says, I see this pattern. I need to work through this. I'm becoming more conscious of this. Nothing about these statements sounds wrong. And that is why the loop survives, because the center that claims awareness is never questioned. In Gnostic terms, this center was not called ego in the modern sense. It was symbolized as a ruler, an organizing principle that governs experience, not by force, but by orientation. As long as life is organized around a central observer who must manage, refine, or direct awakening, the same architecture remains intact. This is why awakening often sharpens perception without dissolving struggle. You begin to see your reactions more clearly, but you still experience them as yours. You notice emotional patterns sooner, but you still relate to them from the same reference point. The loop becomes transparent, but it does not break. Transparency is not freedom. The Pistis Sophia describes this moment as the soul becoming aware of its chains without yet releasing identification with the one who wears them. This is deeply uncomfortable because the seeker expects awareness to be the solution. But awareness alone does not dismantle structure, it only reveals it. And here is where most spiritual paths quietly stop. They teach recognition, but not disidentification. They illuminate patterns, but preserve the one who claims ownership of insight. The Gnostics went further. They asked a question that feels almost dangerous. What happens when the center that seeks liberation is itself seen as part of the structure? This is not a philosophical idea. It is an experiential rupture. Because the moment this center is questioned, control weakens. And control is the hidden engine of repetition. The need to guide life, to steer awakening, to become something different. As long as there is a subtle insistence on becoming, life must repeat in order to preserve continuity. Repetition is how the system maintains identity. This is why dramatic insights often change nothing externally. They are absorbed by the same center that was present before the insight occurred. The awakening becomes a memory, a reference, a story. And stories require a storyteller. The Gnostics warned that liberation does not occur when the story improves. It occurs when the storyteller loosens. This is why true shifts often feel disorienting rather than empowering. When the center collapses, there is no one left to claim progress, no one left to manage meaning. For a moment, life feels strangely unanchored, and this is where most people pull back. They interpret disorientation as regression, loss of clarity, loss of control. But the Gnostics recognized it as a threshold, because repetition does not end through mastery. It ends through decentering. When life is no longer organized around a fixed point of identity, patterns lose their reference. They may still arise, but they no longer bind. They pass without looping. This is the difference between seeing the prison and walking out of it. Walking out does not require effort. It requires no longer standing where the walls are built around you. Until then, awakening remains sincere but incomplete. Insight deepens, language sharpens, understanding grows. Yet life continues to circle the same themes, not because awakening failed, but because the center that repeats the life has not yet been released. When the center begins to loosen, it does not announce itself with clarity or relief. It announces itself through discomfort. This is something the Gnostics understood deeply, and that modern spirituality rarely prepares people for. They did not describe liberation as a peak experience. They described it as a loss of orientation, because when the central position weakens, life no longer feels organized around you. Thoughts still arise, emotions still appear, situations still unfold, but they no longer orbit a stable reference point. This is where the loop starts to destabilize, not because life improves, but because the mechanism that repeats life loses its anchor. Most seekers misinterpret this phase. They feel less motivated, less certain, less compelled to work on themselves, and they assume something has gone wrong. But according to Gnostic insight, this loss of momentum is not regression. It is deconditioning. The soul is no longer being pulled forward by the promise of becoming something else. Without that pull, the repetitive engine slows. This is why the Gnostics warned against replacing ignorance with spiritual ambition. Ambition keeps the center alive. Even noble ambition, even sacred ambition. The desire to awaken, to ascend, to be free, can quietly preserve the very structure that binds. True dissolution begins when effort loses its grip, not because effort is rejected, but because it is no longer necessary. At this stage, observation changes quality. Before, awareness was applied, directed, used. Now, awareness begins to rest. There is no agenda behind it, no attempt to correct what appears. This is critical, because the loop feeds on correction. As long as there is something to fix, there is someone who must fix it, and that someone is the center. When observation becomes non-interfering, patterns no longer receive reinforcement. They arise, but they do not complete their cycle. Without resistance, they weaken. Without ownership, they dissolve. This is why the Gnostics emphasized seeing without attachment. Not detachment as distance, but detachment as non-possession. Thoughts are seen, but not claimed. Emotions are felt, but not personalized. Life unfolds, but is no longer navigated from a central command point. At first, this feels unsettling, because the sense of "I am doing this" begins to fade, and with it fades the illusion of control. But what replaces it is not chaos, it is simplicity. Life still happens, decisions still occur, actions still take place, but they arise from the situation itself, not from an internal manager. This is the beginning of real change, not dramatic, not visible at first, but structural. The loop weakens because its fuel is gone. Repetition requires identification. When identification loosens, patterns no longer find a place to land. They pass through. This is why true liberation often feels ordinary. There is no story to tell about it, no role to claim, no identity to protect. And this ordinariness is precisely what the ego resists, because it offers no significance, no confirmation, no sense of achievement. Yet this is where the Gnostics located freedom, not in transformation, but in release, not in becoming awakened, but in no longer needing to be anyone at all. When this begins to happen, life does change, not because it becomes better, but because it stops repeating itself around the same invisible center. And for the first time, something genuinely new can occur. Very few people allow this process to continue, not because it is too difficult, but because it threatens something most people never realize they are protecting. When the center weakens, fear does not appear as panic. It appears as meaninglessness. A quiet question begins to surface. If I'm not becoming something, then what am I doing with my life? This question terrifies the structure that has organized everything until now, because the loop is not only about suffering, it is also about purpose. Repetition gives life a sense of direction. Even painful patterns provide continuity. They tell the system who it is, what it is working toward, and why tomorrow must resemble yesterday. When this continuity starts to dissolve, the mind reacts immediately. It tries to restore orientation. It reaches for goals, for explanations, for spiritual conclusions. This is why many people re-enter the loop right here. They feel the ground disappear, and they rush to rebuild it. A new practice, a new identity, a new interpretation of what is happening. I'm integrating. I'm going through a phase. This is just another stage of awakening. These explanations feel stabilizing, but they also quietly reinstall the center. The Gnostics warned that the greatest danger is not fear of suffering, but fear of emptiness, because emptiness offers no narrative, no future promise, no reward, and the mind depends on reward to function. This is why liberation feels like loss of ambition, loss of direction, loss of the feeling that something important is ahead. To the ego, this feels like death, not physical death, existential death, the death of being someone on a path. Most people turn back at this point. They prefer meaningful struggle over silent openness. They prefer repetition with identity over freedom without definition. This is not weakness, it is conditioning. The system has trained the soul to equate meaning with movement. Stillness feels unsafe. But the Gnostics knew something radical. What collapses here is not life's meaning. It is the false center that claimed ownership of it. When the urge to rebuild orientation is resisted, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to organize itself without commentary. Events arise and resolve without being framed as progress or failure. Decisions happen without the weight of identity. Suffering may still appear, but it is no longer woven into a personal story. This is where repetition truly loses power, Because repetition requires narration. It requires memory to point backward and expectation to point forward. When neither dominates, the present stops being used as a bridge between past and future. It stands on its own. This is why the Gnostics spoke of liberation as remembering what was always here, not acquiring something new, not escaping the world, but falling out of the structure that measures life by continuity. When this happens, life does not become extraordinary, it becomes immediate, and immediacy has no room for loops. The mind may try one last time to claim this state, to label it, to understand it, to secure it. But even that attempt is seen, and when it is seen clearly, it dissolves on its own. What remains is not a liberated person. It is life, moving without obstruction. And that is why the loop ends. Not because it was defeated, but because nothing is left to keep it turning. When the loop finally dissolves, it does not announce itself as freedom. There is no moment of triumph, no confirmation, no sense of arrival. In fact, nothing seems to happen at all. And that is the point. What disappears is not suffering, but the structure that kept returning to it. Life continues. Circumstances still change, challenges still arise, but they no longer revolve around a fixed center. There is no longer someone standing behind experience, interpreting it, measuring it, or turning it into a personal story. This is why the Gnostics refuse to describe liberation as salvation. Salvation implies rescue, a future moment, an external force. They spoke instead of remembrance, not remembering a past life, not remembering a forgotten truth, but remembering what was never lost. The awareness that was present before effort, before identity, before the need to become. This remembrance is quiet. It does not replace one way of living with another. It removes the compulsion to repeat. And without that compulsion, life stops circling the same patterns. Not because they are resolved, but because they are no longer fed. The mind may still attempt to understand this, to explain it, to secure it. But even that impulse is seen, and when it is seen clearly, it loses authority. Nothing needs to be done with it. This is why awakening does not change your life in the way people expect. It does not rearrange circumstances. It does not promise improvement. It removes the one who was demanding change. And without that demand, life moves freely. This is deeply unsettling at first, because it offers no identity to inhabit, no role to perform, no certainty to hold. But it is also profoundly simple. There is no longer a need to escape the loop, because there is no longer a center trapped inside it. The Gnostic warning was never meant to frighten, it was meant to be precise. They were pointing to the moment when the soul stops asking life to be different and begins seeing it without interference, not as acceptance, not as resignation, but as clarity. If something in this reflection felt uncomfortable, that discomfort is not confusion, it is recognition. You are not failing to awaken. You are standing at the place where awakening stops being an experience and becomes the absence of a seeker. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be achieved. The loop ends when there is no longer anyone waiting for it to end, and what remains was never bound to begin with.